I went out to Harbor Freight today and bought myself a new manual tire changer. And the reason I went out and bought a second one of these is, as you can see, the ends are cut off of the old one. I actually bent this whole tube. This thing was bent over probably right about there and bent over probably almost at a 45. And I haven't not made a video about this yet. I was changing some very difficult tires. I bought myself a lifted golf cart, and the rear tires that were on it were very bald. There was a hole in one of them, and the guy had patched it and taken it off and patched it and whatnot. And I said, you know what? I'm not going to put up with that, and I'm just going to buy new ones and be done with it. So I have, these are Swamp Witch D-Stone tires. What are they? 22, 11, 10. And I broke that bar on one of these two rear tires. Or bent it, sorry. And I figured I'd just go out and buy a second one of these things. They're not super expensive. I used a 20% off, and I think it came to manual tire changer $31.99. So really not that bad for another one. I have gotten my money's worth out of the first one that I had, but I have all sorts of pieces and parts. You know, I bend or break something here. I have extra bar. I could weld another pipe onto here. I have one of these. I have bent the daylights out of this thing here, and this is all edge here on this piece is all mushroomed over. So I want to improve this thing, and how I want to improve this is the metal on the old one down on the base here is fatigued. It is getting kind of weak, and I want to take the grinder and grind these surfaces here, clean them up, and weld the whole thing, all four of these pieces. They bolt it, it's fine. To use one of these things, you really have to bolt it to concrete. You can't really use stones. Concrete's really the best option to put this on, unless you have something big that you can bolt it to. But I'm going to fully weld this base together, and I will have a second one of these if and when I ever need it. Probably not, but the other tire changer that I have, it had changed maybe 20 tires. I'm trying to think if there's anything else, something like that. So it was kind of wore out after 20 tires, but it's still usable. The base, like I said, on the old one is getting weak, so I figured I would just fully weld this one. I don't really need the steel or anything for this. I don't really know what I would use it for at the moment, but again, I have all sorts of extra pieces and parts, which is a really nice thing to have. And I figured I still have the 90 amp flux core welder there, just sitting up on the tool cart. But I wanted to try out this titanium Flux 125. So I guess let's get started here. I've already done a video on this. This was actually sent to me free from a viewer. He paid the shipping and everything. I did not pay for anything. And I offered it if he wanted some money for it. He said he wouldn't take anything. So I thought that was a very, very generous gift. You know who you are. So let's get started here. I had thought about doing this originally to my other tire changer, and I don't know why I didn't do it. I thought, you know, why would they bolt them? I think it'd be better if I just welded this whole thing together. And looking back on it now, I definitely should have welded it. So all I'm doing here is just prepping the steel on all of this to fully weld this thing. You cannot, well, you shouldn't weld through powder coat, paint, rust, etc., etc. It should be clean steel that you are welding to. I know we don't live in a perfect world,
but I can spend, I don't know, 10-15 minutes and grind off all this powder coat on here in order to get a good weld on this thing. So I'm using the Bauer cordless angle grinder, also from Harbor Freight. Same thing with this table and the welder. You'll probably be seeing a bunch of other Harbor Freight tools, but even that extension cord is from Harbor Freight. So I'm just prepping stuff and making sure everything lines up the way that it should.
This is that titanium FLUX 125. It's a DC flux core welder, and that's all it does. It does not do anything else. Pretty simple stuff here. Got the tensioner tensioned. He's got some wire in here for me. And the button is in the back. And it does take it a while to start up. So we've got wire feed speed of 10, I think. But we're going to put that down to maybe 3. And we're going to put the heat the whole way up to J. I'm assuming that's what those are. So let's, I'm going to tack this thing together first, and then we will fully weld it from both sides. Now I will say this is literally my first time using this welder. I've turned it on before and did a video about it, but I've never actually welded with it yet.
You guys will see here, I did not have the wire feed speed correct. I had too little wire feed speed for as much heat as I was putting into this thing. And it was, the arc was stop, start, stop, start. So after I raised the wire feed speed, it seemed to work a lot better. They say that your when you're welding, it should sound like frying bacon. I've heard that a lot of people say that before, and I actually have too much heat on for this metal. I think this is not 3/16. That plate that the tube bolts to, that flat plate where the bolts are, it's over 1/8 of an inch if I remember correctly. So for these side C-channel pieces, they're thinner, and I don't need as much heat. I've actually burned through on these a couple times.
So I've got to say, this thing definitely sounds a lot different, and I actually have to put the wire feed speed up more. The only reason I'm so used to running my old welder, I always just turn up the heat to the max. This one has infinite variable controls, obviously for the wire feed speed, but also for all of the heat settings also. So let's fully weld these 4 pieces, and then I will weld this top column to the 4, or to the 3 pieces.
I notice on the edges of these pieces of steel is where I would burn through, because I, again, just took this thing and put it right to the max, because generally speaking, with 110 volt welders, pretty much for most applications, you're just going to run it maxed out, as much power as you can put to that. I mentioned this later in the video, but I will mention it again. This is a DC welder, and I have never welded with a DC welder before. This was literally my very first time. And coming from AC, my old welder, my old 90 amp welder from Harbor Freight, I think I'd put about 40 to 50 pounds of welding wire through that machine, and as the years progressed, it seemed to, the last time I turned it on, the fan, I think it took it a minute to get up to speed, and I think there's a bearing going in it. But what I noticed using this welder to my old one, this welder seems to run hotter. Now, I think the old one has probably losing its ability to weld, to put a lot of heat into something like it used to, as where this welder is brand new. So this welder puts down a very hot weld.
Well, I've got to say, so far, you can lay down some pretty nice beads with this thing.
I remember in a couple of my other welding videos that I have up on YouTube that I think they got 100 or 200,000 views, something like that. A lot of people were, well, some people were complaining about me using a fan, saying, oh, you can't weld in windy conditions. The fan here is only being used to blow the smoke out of my face. If you've ever been around a campfire, it on a non-windy day, when a day that it is not windy, that smoke, for whatever reason, from the campfire will follow you all the way around it. And welding is no different. I could be on the left side of this thing, on the right side, and before I'm done, before I finish that welding pass, there will be smoke blowing back in my face. These fumes that come off from welding are not healthy for you to breathe. There's warning labels all over this, all over the welding spools and stuff. Don't be breathing this stuff, so this is why I use a fan. And if you guys are welding and you're having problems with smoke getting up underneath your welding mask or coming back in your face, having a fan blowing above the weld, not on the weld, above it, will help out. Now, this is a flux core welder. Also, this is not a MIG machine. So that's why I can weld outside and in windy conditions, and these welds will be fine because it has the flux in the wire, not the gas on the outside that blows away. So now that we've cleared that up, I also want to mention I am not a professional at this. I am a do-it-yourselfer. I was self-taught welding, just watching Chucky 2009's videos on YouTube, and that's pretty much how I learned how to weld. Like I said, I'm not a professional, and you guys do this at your own risk. That's just how things are. I have never gone to welding school or taken a class or anything. My opinion with the welding classes, they're great and everything, but I can get one heck of a good education on YouTube for free that won't cost me anything, and I just basically have to repeat what they're doing and figure out the settings on my machine and the angle of the welding gun here to hold, and wires stick out and stuff like that, and contact tips. And I have a dedicated 20 amp circuit in this building, so I am running nothing else off of this. This is just running probably some light bulbs inside, and the welder and the fan, and that's it. You should use a 20 amp circuit when you are using a 120 volt welder. A dedicated 20 amp circuit. You will be less likely to trip a breaker. Another reason why I wanted to crank up the heat on this welder the whole way was to see if I could get a breaker to pop, and I was unsuccessful at doing that. So this welder can run, they recommend a 20 amp circuit to power it, and it does that just fine. I did not pop ours in the barn, and it seems to weld just fine. But I've got to say, I'm very impressed with this welder so far. Granted, it has not withstood the test of time like the other one has yet, but I don't see why this one would not. It's a really nice welder. There's really no two ways around it. Going from an AC welder to a DC welder, if you've just been welding with an AC welder, you really need to try out a DC welder, and you won't believe how much better your welds will look, how much less spatter you will have, and it's just an all-around better welding process than an AC one, in my opinion. And guys, again, I'm not a professional at this. These are all just my experiences, and just take them for what it's worth. So, anyways, this thing is having no problems welding this steel here, and I'm really glad I'm getting to make this tire changer as rigid as possible. Like I said, I should have done this to the other one, but I don't know why I didn't. I think I was just wanting to get started doing stuff, and the base of this thing will be very strong for a very long time. I have fully welded both sides of this. I'm not the kind of person that partially welds something or stitch welds it or whatever the case may be. I try to do things once and do it right, and then I never have to come back to it again. You know, I don't have to fix it, or something cracked or something broke or whatever the case may be. So I try to fully weld everything. I know it takes more time and electricity and money, and you know, the list goes on and on. But in the end, in my opinion, it's worth it. I don't have to come back to it again. This tire changer should be good for the next 20 years. I've pretty much am done buying tires now. Well, I probably shouldn't say that, because now I'm probably going to have to buy some more. But in the event that I have to change more tires and the other tire changer breaks or whatever the case may be, I have this one to put in its place. So I don't know why this camera here is not staying in focus. It's it kind of bothers me, but I think it's focusing here on my mask. But I'll tell you, I am impressed with this welder. And I'm not trying to put on a sales pitch or anything here. I have no affiliation with Harbor Freight or anything as of right now. That may change in the future. Time will tell, right? But all in all, this is a great welder, and it is double the price of the AC one. However, I still think it is worth the extra $100.
Here's what my welds look like. This is pretty much my first time using this welder. I have never welded with this machine before, but I don't think I did too bad. I was definitely putting it in pretty hot. There's a bit of undercut on this edge up here, but that's okay with me. This is literally a tire changer I probably won't ever use, but it's there if I ever need it. So I am very pleased with this welder. This seems like a great welder. It definitely welds different than the other AC welder that I have. This is a DC welder. Seems to be really good, and it also seems that it seems like it has more power. I've noticed that I crank this thing up. I'm just used to my other welder and just putting it on max and off we go. But being that this is a DC welder, I think, and you guys will correct me if I'm wrong down in the comments below, but I think this welder, being a more efficient welder, will put more heat and power to the workpiece so that you can technically weld thicker metal. Granted, I think they rate this up to 3/16. I don't think it's quarter, but I think it has more power than my other one, just from what I've seen so far. There's a lot less spatter. I have gone over this with a wire wheel, or no wire wheel, just a wire brush right there. That's all that I did to this, and there's really no spatter that I see. So I'm very pleased with this thing. 2 thumbs up. Way to go, Harbor Freight, for the win once again. Now the only thing that's left to do here with this thing is to just paint the welds here that are exposed to the elements so they don't rust. So hope everyone enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more, and hopefully we will see you all in the next one. Thanks for watching.